The greatest compliment I can get from any non-film person is, I didn't notice the cinematography in that film, because the ultimate goal is if my work is not seen, but felt, then I have succeeded. If I had to put the cinematography of Greig Fraser into words, I'd describe it as invisible, flexible and restrained, yet always functional to the telling of the story. I've mentioned the idea on this channel before that some DPs like to produce images by throwing bold, colourful splashes unashamedly across a canvas, while others focus on sketching nuanced details that tell a larger story. Fraser falls into the latter category of artists. In this episode of Cinematography Style, I'll break down the work of Greig Fraser by looking at his philosophy on filmmaking, then analyse how his use of technical gear backs up his style photographically. If you'd like to get these and other videos early and also support the channel at the same time, I've started a Patreon page which I'll link in the description. Australian-born Fraser was introduced to making images while he attended photography school in Melbourne. After working solo as a professional photographer of still images, he transitioned into working with moving images, after being introduced by friends who worked for a production company. He preferred the team dynamic of the film industry over working as a more solitary photographer. Over his career, he shot a variety of films for many successful directors, such as Jane Campion, Matt Reeves, Catherine Bigelow, Bennett Miller, Garth Davis, and Adam McKay. Often, DPs are pigeonholed based on the work they initially produce, as producers or directors who do the hiring like to see a visual track record of the kind of work they want to replicate. If it's a period drama, they want the DOP to have already worked on one. The same applies to a VFX blockbuster or a horror film. Throughout his career, though, Fraser has managed to not be pinned down to one specific style or genre. I do deliberately take films that are very different from each other. I hope that strong drama runs through as a kind of thread in the projects I choose. I like to think that I'm supportive of great actors doing their thing, regardless of the project. It's an interesting philosophical idea that runs through his work, the notion that photography takes on a supportive role in the telling of the story, by not trying to stand out too much, yet at the same time subtly enforcing a perspective on the story. This can be found in his treatment of camera movement. He bases how the camera moves off of the pacing in the story. For example, if a character takes a moment to slow down emotionally and be more thoughtful, then the camera movement mimics this by becoming more stable and grounded. In scenes which are more stressful, hurried, or with increased physical action, the camera movement follows suit and becomes rougher with more dynamism. This idea is backed up by the gear he chooses. He doesn't subscribe to using the same gear or to having an overarching visual style, even on the same film. He changes lighting, camera movement, mediums, or even switches between anamorphic and spherical lenses, depending on the emotional content of each scene. He believes that the story should inform the style of the cinematography, rather than the other way around. This is why, in preparing for a film, he avoids using other visual references for inspiration, instead turning to text. In the case of Lion, there was a documentary about this guy's story, and I very deliberately avoided watching that documentary, because I feel like as visualists, consciously or subconsciously, we are sponges for every image that we see around us. By reading, whether you're reading the source material or information about it, you make it visual. It creates an image in your mind, and it's those images from my imagination that I'll try and translate when I'm standing on the set and making a decision about a lens, a location, or a blocking. Although his gear choices vary from film to film, let's try to find some trends in the technical gear that Fraser works with. True to his restrained, invisible style, his lighting is minimal, based off of natural light, and doesn't try to do too much. He's known for minimizing his lighting package, which decreases the rental budget and speeds up setup times. One way he achieves this is by using negative fill to shape the light naturally. When you're a young filmmaker in Australia, you get the tiniest amount of lighting equipment, but you get loads of solids, so that you can often shape the light through negative fill. Using black textiles is a cheap, efficient way of subtracting light from a scene, while retaining the integrity of natural light. The second you put up an electronic light, you're fighting it. The color is wrong, the intensity is wrong, the softness is wrong. It takes more effort to make light look natural than it does to make natural light look shaped. To me, that's the preferred methodology of lighting. When he does use electric lighting fixtures, he likes to go with LEDs whenever possible. Not only do LEDs produce a much lower carbon footprint on set, but they also have many practical advantages, such as being easier to transport, operate, and quicker to set up. Because LEDs require far less power to run than, say, tungsten lights, Fraser often gets away with only needing small, portable generators. He did this on Mary Magdalene, which allowed him the ability to easily set up lights in remote locations without needing access to large lighting trucks or generators. His lighting package on the film consisted of just 20 digital Sputnik DS6s. With these lights, he got his colorist to dial in the specific color temperature settings in pre-production, so that the color levels would remain consistent between scenes. LEDs also tend to be less directional and softer than HMIs, which means it's more difficult to tell where the light source is coming from. This makes artificial light appear more natural. He's also used other LEDs, such as cream source Doppio bicolors and light gear light matte panels, which are easy to rig and can be used to provide a soft, diffused sunlight look. The camera movement in his films are varied. For work which requires to be more traditionally cinematic, he shoots with stable, subtle dolly movement. For scenes which are more personal, with an elevated emotional component, he'll often turn to shooting handheld or using a Steadicam. On Lion, where he required rapid movement during action scenes in tight spaces, which were still stabilized, he used a gimbal. He described this as a remote head, but with legs. His gimbal operator would run and chase after the action, keeping the camera pointed in the right direction. He would then wirelessly control the tilt and pan of the camera on the gimbal by using wheels. This allowed him to precisely control the framing of each shot. He's used many different cameras, lenses, and mediums on his films, from 8mm film to large format digital. His choice of mediums alters depending on the story. For example, he opted to shoot Vice on film to place the viewer in the correct historical period. The good thing about film is it instantly registers with a viewer and can take you to a certain time, visually. I wouldn't say it's nostalgia, because it's not the right word, but it takes you to a place of memory. Recently, he's taken to shooting large format digital on the Alexa 65. He acknowledges that it's very effective at rendering detail of deteriorated, natural textures and locations. This digital sharpness, however, works against the DOP when shooting artificial textures, such as plastic or chrome, where it can pick up imperfections and make them feel overly artificial. He has an ARRI bias, and some of his camera selections include the Alexa Mini, the Alexa 65, the ARRI Cam LT for 35mm, and the ARRI Flex 416 for 16mm work. Like his choice of mediums, his choice of lenses have also varied from project to project. Some lenses he's used include Cooke anamorphics, which are sharp in the center and less sharp around the edges of frame, with beautiful, smooth fall-off and bokeh. Other lenses include Angenieux zooms, Panavision anamorphics, a Canon 75-1500 zoom, and the ARRI DNAs, which he worked closely with ARRI to develop. He uses a mix of focal lengths across his work, but will often shoot with a long zoom or for stable base, such as a dolly or tripod. When shooting on film, he had a particular love for Kodak 5230, which he loved shooting for its rich, low contrast, desaturated look before it was discontinued. His digital LUTs and color tends to replicate this lower contrast but rich film look. Studying the work of Fraser shows that sometimes the best cinematic approach is one that is visually restrained and adaptive. In cinematography, we have many tools in our toolbox that we can choose from: tungsten or LED lights, digital or film, anamorphic or spherical, dolly or handheld. The list goes on. Fraser is always mindful of all the tools he has to work with and is discerning about choosing the right tool for the right job. He strives to tell stories in a way that makes the emotion that we feel inside when we watch a scene strong and present, but invisible to the untrained eye. As usual, I'd just like to sincerely thank those viewers who've signed up to Patreon already. Liking, subscribing, and commenting is also another great way of helping out the channel. Until next time, thanks for watching, and goodbye.